Good evening, councillors and officers and members of the public. The first item on the agenda this evening for the Audit and Governance Committee needs to be election of a chair, because the chair is not actually here and the vice chair is not here either. So do I have a nomination for chair, please? Councillor Emerson.
Nominate Councillor Gittings.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Councillor Gittings, I pass over to you as chair.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the votes in this election. As everybody's otherwise engaged. But no, seriously, we've got some serious matters to attend to tonight's meeting of audit and governance. I mean, there's a note here about asking everybody present that the meeting we recorded. There aren't any members of the public here present tonight, but this is going to be recorded on the internet for those that it's broadcast live on the internet and will be available for repeat viewing on the council's website. You should be also aware the council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during a webcast will be retained in accordance with the council's published policy. For those seated in the public gallery at the moment, there aren't any, but if there are, you won't be filmed. Members of the public are only able to speak if they have registered their intentions in accordance with the council's procedure rules, and I don't think anybody has notified us of that. As chair, I have the discretion to adjourn the meeting in the event there is a disorderly conduct from councillors or members of the public in accordance with Standing Orders 34 and 35. I can also terminate and suspend webcasting in the meeting in accordance with the webcasting protocol. Well, I'm pretty sure I won't have to do any of that tonight, but I do have to, unfortunately, read that out. So we start the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. And we have here the minutes, which is pages 5 to 12, certainly on the agenda pack that I've got. Are there any matters arising or issues of accuracy? Don't see anybody indicating. I will sign these as a correct record in due course. Item number 3 is questions for some members of the public or from councillors. I haven't been notified of any.
No, Chair, there are none.
No, Chair, thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to item number 4, the internal audit quarterly progress report. And I think Mr. Harrington is going to give his usual report. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my standard quarterly report summarising those audits completed in the final quarter of the last financial year, and also summarising those investigations undertaken by the corporate investigations team. As with my usual reports, the detail is in the appendix, which is on page 17, which I'm going to skip straight to. I'm just going to give a very, very quick overview of the audits we've completed, and I'll take any questions at the end of the report. So the first subject you will see, or the first area, were parks and grounds maintenance. So a follow-up review of the park service has seen an improvement in the upkeep of data and resource allocation to support overtime payments. So there are now clear data to support how resources are being used. All internal audit recommendations has now been actioned and implemented. So that's really positive. Second one on my list is the climate change strategy. So this was incorporated into the council's internal audit plan by virtue of its entry in the strategic risk register, and it's the first audit examination of the subject as a discrete assignment. And our audit concluded that whilst controls for delivering and monitoring responsibilities contained in the Reading Climate Emergency Strategy are still in the early stages of development, so we're satisfied with the performance monitoring and governance arrangements in place. So again, that is positive. Next one on my list is the main bank and feeder system reconciliations. So for those of you who have been members of this committee for a while, you will you'll no doubt recollect that both internal and external audits have reported concerns in the past over the infrequency of bank reconciliations, and I'm now thankfully in a position to report that the main bank reconciliation is now up to date, clear and well supported, and it has been over the last 12 months, certainly over the financial year 21-22. So given the well-documented issues in the past with not regularly and routinely achieving this fundamental control in the recent past, this should now give a tentative indication of a welcome improvement in financial control. We still, however, need to do some more work on the corporate oversight of the feeder system reconciliations, but again, that is positive news. The one area where we've given a limited assurance, which is a negative assurance opinion, is intercompany accounting. And this is basically the recording of financial transactions between the council and Brighter Futures for Children. And we concluded that in-year reconciliations had not happened, and the 2021 grant position was only being finalised at the time of our audit, which was in February 2022. It wasn't possible to identify the responsible RBC person who maintains and monitors and reconciles grant receipts and payments. Brighter Futures has not regularly requested RBC to transfer over the 1.15 million of grant funding that have been received in the council's accounts. Likewise, quarterly charges to Brighter Futures for statutory positions had not occurred, for statutory posts had not been transferred either. So that's an area of concern for us. We did do a thorough audit in July 2020, and we did report similar findings. So I'm disappointed to say that we haven't seen a great deal of improvement in that area. So that's an area we will keep a close eye on in the future. The last one is the transition from children to adults. So this covers both Brighter Futures and Reading Borough Council, and it's our opinion that the governance structure is one of collaboration and compliance with the structure, providing a well-informed transition process involving both children's care and adult social care, with little risk of unknown costs at transition. So again, that's a positive area. The report then just goes on. 2 grant sign-offs have been undertaken in the past quarter. So that's the Cultural Recovery Fund grant and Travel Demand Management grants. So following appropriate checks and investigations, we can confirm that all conditions to the grants were complied with. So that's positive. On page 27, just gives you an update of where we are with the plan. So we're nearly there. So anything that hasn't been completed at the 31st of March is carried over and will be completed in the next few weeks. So we're practically there on the audit plan. And then section 4 of the report just gives you a summary of the work to date by the corporate investigations team. Okay. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Harrington? Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a question for the Director of Finance through you, Chair, just on the intercompany, what we've just heard from the Chief Auditor. I appreciate we're implementing a new financial management system, but obviously having some of the recommendations for October is quite a way away, and I'd hope that some of them can be kind of partially met ahead of October, pending it being live. So I just seek some reassurance on that, Chair.
Yeah, Darren, you taking this?
Yeah, I am. So as members of the committee will be aware, I'm currently in a unique position of being responsible for the finances for RBC and for Brighter Futures. So I want to give assurance to the committee that by the time we bring a report to the next meeting of Audit Committee in July, I'm expecting to be able to report significant progress against this. The full implementation of all of the actions will come later when we've implemented the new financial system, because we need to make sure that whatever we put in place now is in accordance with how things will work when we move on to the new financial system, but that is not going to hold up the majority of the work on this. So I give you my assurance that you will see significant progress against these actions by the time of the next report to this committee.
Yeah, thanks for that. You mentioned you're sort of across the two organisations. Is that something that's going to remain permanent, or is that a situation that's arisen?
It's an interim arrangement that was approved through Policy Committee last year, and a permanent appointment to the Brighter Futures role has now been made and approved at Policy Committee, and that person will be starting in June.
Okay, I'm sure that it's a capacity thing, isn't it? So that actually will be a good sign, and then some of these gremlins may hopefully be ironed out, and you can resume your day job.
That would be good.
Great, thanks for that. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that update. I was just wanted to highlight one of the points on there with regards to the climate change strategy, section 2.2.1, and just to highlight that it's a very positive thing that's become part of the strategic risk register, and just highlights how important it is and shows the council's commitments within the for the emergency climate strategy. So it's really just to welcome that it's now part of the strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor McEwen. I mean, I think it's across 76 out of 127 actions, so it shows how much it's ingrained within our commitments. Okay, I don't see anybody else indicating. I'm looking to my the online board. I think Councillor McElroy is joining us online. I probably should have mentioned that at the start, but so we can move on to agenda item 6, which is the internal audit plan, internal audit charter 2022-23. Is this Paul again? Yes, Mr. Harrington. That's a good. There's me skipping through all the papers. Apologies for that. The audit investigations, corporate health and safety, and this is going to be a report on the strategic risk register, quarter 4. How could I miss that? Apologies for that. We have a whole wedge of papers here, and
thank you, Chair.
So over to you, Mr. Harrington.
Easily done. Right. Okay. So this is the strategic risk register for the authority. So these are the top strategic risks as identified by the corporate management team, and it just gives you an update of the position of the risks as at quarter 4. You will note that it says audit and investigations and the corporate and health and safety team. So going forward, this will be presented by a member of the corporate health and safety team. So all risks are tracked and monitored by the CMT, and they're reported to this committee each quarter. And you can see in the appendix the 10 risks, and it just gives you a direction of travel of the risks over the financial year. So there are 10 risks, and at the end of quarter 4, 2 were rated as red, which is the climate risk and the cyber security risk. And I'm pretty confident that if you would look at any authority risk register, you would find those 2 risks flashing red on strategic risk registers. 6 amber and 2 greens. So all I'm requesting the committee to do is to note the council's strategic risks and the actions to mitigate the risks as at the end of quarter 4.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Harrington. I'm looking around. Anybody want to say anything on this? Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, thank you for this report. Just to highlight the, reading through all of this information, one of the high risk ratings was the cyber risk, and obviously that's been in the media talking about, cyber attacks from different companies, and so obviously very important. And I think it's highlighted in a couple of other reports later on of the work that's going on in terms of training as well, which I think is very important. So yeah, it's good that it's recognised what an important risk it is, but also the work that's happening around to try to resolve. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And I think Councillor McElroy wants to comment, and then perhaps we can get Mr. Harrington to address some of those. Hello, Councillor McElroy.
Hey, thanks. thanks for that bit of an echo, but I'll try and go through. Yeah, obviously, we're really happy to see this turn up on the strategic risk register. No surprises there. I think this was asked for by Councillor Williams back in July 2019 when the climate emergency was originally declared. So great to see that this is finally here and starting to take a place in the broader consideration of priorities for the council. So really happy to see this.
Great, thanks for that. I think it. Mr. Harrington,
yeah, I could just comment on the cyber risk. Cyber risk is one of those ever-changing risks which you just can't stand still. Every time the appropriate prevention measures are put in place, the individuals who want to commit the crime, the cyber attack, they're inventing new methods to do it. So it doesn't stand still. So at the moment, my IT colleagues are still ranking this as a red residual risk. But as I say, the council's systems and protections are adequate, and we're monitoring any attacks, whether it's phishing attacks, cyber attacks, and as I say, the council's defences are secure, but it's an ever-changing risk. Yeah. I
mean, obviously we did discuss this before the meeting, and is it the case that the bigger risk comes from obviously people have had the training to obviously not to open certain links, phishing emails? Is the biggest risk from that, or is it from the actual system itself? I mean, that's probably an unfair question. Somebody's not an IT expert, but is it in terms of a cyber attack on the council? Will it be because our firewall's not sufficient, or we've got a systems fault rather than say an individual member of staff or a councillor opening an email?
If I can caveat my response, in as I'm not an IT expert, but I suspect it's a combination of both. So the cyber attacks or the types of attacks you are talking about can happen via, which looks like a perfectly innocent email, somebody clicking onto a link, and then that downloads software which attacks your system. So it's very, very important that we train staff and we keep the awareness there for staff that this is a real risk.
Yeah, I mean, there's a report on that later, which actually shows some encouraging signs. So thanks for that, Mr. Harrington. So we can hopefully follow the agenda as per the items in the right order. So we are now at agenda item 6, which is the internal audit plan and charter for 2022-23. Over to Mr. Harrington again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the work of the internal audit team for the financial year 2022-23. So it's my responsibility to provide an annual formal opinion on the council's control environment. And that opinion does not simply mean view, comment or observation. It means that the internal audit team will have done significant evidence work to form a supported conclusion about the council's activities that we have examined. The attached audit plan in Appendix 1 will allow the effective discharge of this responsibility. So what I do each year is I will meet on a one-to-one basis with all executive directors, with assistant directors, and I start to populate the plan. I look at the risk registers. I have my own knowledge where the internal audit team should be focusing over the next 12 months. I then take a draft plan to the DMTs, to the corporate management team, and the legislation is now for the audit committee to approve the plan, but not to direct the audit plan. That's a 151 section 151 responsibility. Also attached to this report is the Audit Charter, which effectively sets out the role of internal audits, our purpose, our authority, our scope and our responsibility. And it's good practice that I present that charter once a year, once to the corporate management team, and then secondly to the Audit and Governance Committee.
Okay, thanks for that clear explanation. Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, I know what Mr. Harrington had said. It's quite right that he advises us on what is prudent, but I just wanted to, welcome what is proposed in the plan, because I think it covers a huge variety, and having sat on the committee, I for a little while now. You know, it's clear that there's some newer areas, but not too dissimilar to audits we've had. And personally, I welcome the cybersecurity one, as we've just discussed, which is appearing in Q2, which is obviously quite soon on in the year. And then also the audit committee review, which is something we've spoken about before on this committee, myself and Councillor Stevens mostly, on the Redmond review, etc. And I think it will be good timing when we have a large intake of councillors to, you know, go through what the Audit and Governance Committee does and how we can best provide that governance. So I just wanted to welcome it, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Emerson. Sure. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so we're asked to, I don't see anybody else indicating, we're asked to approve this plan. So all the panel, all those in favour of approving the plan? Great, okay. Thanks very much for that, Mr. Harrington. We can move on to agenda item 7, which is the implementation of the Finance Improvement Programme, and it's a progress update. So I'm looking in the direction. Is Chris Tidwell's down as the officer? Is Chris speaking to this? Yes. Actually, he's on my screen to the right. So over to you, Mr. Tidwell. Can you hear us, Mr. Tidwell?
That's better. My apologies, I was muted there. Can you
That's
all
right.
Hear me okay?
It's all right. It's the most common phrase, isn't it, of the last couple of years? You're on mute. Okay, over to you.
Yes, it happens to be a lot, full enough. Thank you. Good evening. Just to introduce this paper, which is the latest update on the Finance Improvement Programme. Section 3 on page 83 gives some background. So this is an update that's presented to each Audit and Governance Committee on a quarterly basis, and that section outlines the governance arrangements for the programme and the work streams. Section 4 on page 84 gives a high-level update around each of the work streams, but I wanted to concentrate at this point on section 4.2. As we've reported previously, progress has been made under phase 1 with delivering the 6 work streams and responding to the issues that they raised. We've also talked about in the past phase 2 of finance transformation, which, to give you some background, considers finance transformation from a corporate perspective across the whole organisation. It considers the financial management arrangements, financial governance, delivery of the overarching financial management environment. And what we're doing is aligning that programme, phase 2, with the implementation of the finance system. The board and the Director of Finance are currently developing the delivery plan for phase 2, which will have milestones aligned to implementation of the finance system. And the paper under 4.2 outlines the 3 key areas that we'll be concentrating on between now and the go live for the finance system later in the year. The first phase is enabling the finance team and engaging the finance team. So this is through training and development. We've got to build the skills that are necessary for a true finance partnering team, so that finance provides that strategic advice and support to the organisation. And it will ensure that that is consistently delivered through a business partnering arrangement with appropriate skills to support that. The second element is thinking about the broader organisation. So this is about building awareness across the council, across all services and across committees as well, so that budget holders and those have responsibility and accountability for resources will understand what that actually means. We'll do this through a series of workshops and development sessions, and it will introduce the concept of self-service or self-management for budget holders, which will give them an understanding of how they can undertake that and how that will be supported through the finance team. The third element is again aligned to the finance system. So we've talked about developing the finance teams, we've talked about developing the finance environment and awareness across the organisation. The third element is delivering those tools that are necessary for budget holders to be able to undertake self-service and self-management of budgets. So this will be through a series of training events and workshops to provide skills and knowledge to teams that they'll need to be able to operate within the new financial environment. That paragraph at the end gives you a broad idea of the timetable. So the next Finance Transformation Board, which is tomorrow, will discuss the timetable and plan for sign-off. That plan and timetable then will start to deliver through June, July with the finance teams, August and September with the broader council teams, and then finance system training is scheduled for September and October, with a go live on the new system in October, at the beginning of October. In terms of the workstream updates, building on those reports that we presented in the past, starting with accounts payable, all the deliverables have been completed. We also present in this report for members, if members recollect, around audit tracker recommendations that are specifically relevant to transformation areas. Accounts payable has 3 currently audit tracker recommendations. 2 are green, which would mean that in due course we'll remove, and 1 remains at amber. The one that remains amber, there's some narrative there to explain that this is around supplier setup and control over the verification and the number of suppliers. And in response to that, we're researching the base data to be able to determine the best way to proceed with that. Under accounts receivable, there's a summary there of the deliverables. There are 4 that are still in progress, which essentially relate to historic debt, developing a service level agreement and user guides. At the chart of accounts work stream is being completed. Ongoing work around the chart of accounts is now part of redesigning and implementing the finance system. So those continual work to look at the chart of accounts, its structure and elements. The section on reconciliations and final accounts, this is subject of a paper anyway, which the Director of Finance will be introducing as an update later on. But again, the recommendations there from the audit tracker, there were 7, there are now 6, and giving the comments earlier from Mr. Harrington, those relating to bank reconciliations and the recent audit report will also change. The final element I wanted to comment on was the implementation of the new finance system. There are commentary around the purpose of the new system. As you know, the current contract expires in December this year, and we have a scheduled go live for the new finance system of the 1st of October. The important thing for me is that the governance arrangements and members understand the governance arrangements. So there is a finance system board, which is chaired by the Director of Finance, which reports through to the Finance Transformation Board. And as you'll see, that meets on a fortnightly basis. In terms of progress, the last paragraph before section 6 on page 89 refers to where we are in implementing the new finance system. So the design phase has been completed. The build phase commenced in March and will be completed in May. And we progressed then through testing in June, testing by users across directorates in July and August, training in September and October in preparation for a go live on the 1st of October. And there aren't any audit recommendations relating to the finance system. That's a summary of the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Tidswell? I mean, just looking at the new system implementation, that does seem quite an ambitious target really for October with the new system, and given that some of the testing is going to be during what I call the holiday period of August, are we confident with that timetable?
I suggest that Darren, thank you.
Yeah, I assume Chris might suggest I step in at that point. Yeah, there is a huge amount of work to be done to get us ready for that go live. We are still confident that we will be able to go live. If there is if we did get to the 1st of October and we find that going live on that date wouldn't be secure, we do have the option to go for a slightly later date. We're not aiming to do that. We are determined to try to go live on the 1st of October, and we're putting in the resources to enable us to do that. But as I've said to the committee many times, we will only go live with the new financial system when it is sound and secure and has been properly tested, and we're all confident that it will work.
Well, thanks. That was just obviously just the fear of it coming back to the committee with somebody being paid in triplicate somewhere, and it not, you know, or the cross company accounting, because it seems to me quite a complex arrangement. But we are obviously, I'm sure that's being attended to.
There is a huge amount of work going on.
Great. Okay. Fingers crossed. No. So no, thanks for the update. Thanks for the update. Great. Nobody else is signalling, so I think we're asked to note this. So thanks very much, Mr. Tidswell, for that report. Okay, we can move on to agenda item 8, which is the implementation of the audit recommendations tracker. And I'm looking towards Jackie, Miss Jackie Yates, to report on this.
Thank you, Chair. So members have seen this report in previous committees. It effectively reports on progress with implementation of outstanding audit recommendations. The detail of those recommendations are set out in Appendix 1. Following discussion at the last committee, a couple of tweaks have been made to the report to hopefully make things a little clearer and to address some concerns members had about progress with implementation. So whilst you will see that in overall terms there are currently 101 recommendations on the tracker, and the status of those recommendations in terms of how many are complete or RAG rated, green, amber or red, is set out at paragraph 47 rather. At paragraph 48, we have addressed of those recommendations at Appendix 1, how many are more than 12 months old. So you can see of that 101 recommendations, 28 are more than 12 months old, and the RAG status of those, whether they're complete, red, amber, green, again is indicated. So I'm pleased to say that since the last meeting, 8 of those older recommendations have been completed, and a number of others have moved on. The other tweak that was made to the report is at 4.11, which shows progress from the previous report in January to the current report. So previously we were reporting a total of 61 recommendations on the appendix, and 11 of those at the January meeting had been completed and have subsequently been removed. There are now 12 recommendations on the current appendix which are being reported as complete and will be removed next time. Of those that were previously green, 3 are now complete, and 9 are still green, etc. So 4.11 effectively is indicating the progress with and movement to that tracker. So hopefully that's a little bit clearer and easier for members to follow. Just to say, in relation to the older recommendations, again following discussion last time, there are a number of colleagues on the call who are here to provide members with some update or reassurance should that be required of those recommendations which were more than 12 months old. So if members wanted further information on those, then I'm sure officers can provide that. Clearly, a number of them were in the finance area, and we have already spoken of some of them: bank and cash reconciliation, intercompany transfers. We've heard from Mr. Harrington about some of those. However, we have got Mr. Crosby on the phone, on the line rather, who I am sure will be more than happy to talk about licensing and SIL and the car parking recommendations if that is required. And I know we've also got Kate Grayfoot on the phone, who may be able to assist with some of the purchasing cards along with Mr. Carter. So I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you.
And take any questions.
Right. Are there any questions? So with all these the officers that are to answer questions, I think we almost feel under pressure now to come up with a stream of questions to do with licensing and things. But no, thanks for your attendance. Seriously, it's welcome, and this obviously really important piece of work. This councillors do have questions. Councillor Emberson.
Sorry, Deputy Chief Executive, but I think it's the only one you didn't mention, which is the rent guarantee scheme. Is there someone online that can answer that?
I am going to ask Mr. Crosby if he's able to pick that one up. I am aware that the Assistant Director for that area is on leave, unfortunately, and I'm not sure, other than Mr. Crosby, I've got a substitute for that.
I can certainly help with any questions, and it might be that I'm not able to answer them directly, but I can take those away and come back to you.
Okay, Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, I mean, so I had asked via other streams, but the narrative is just a little bit unclear as to where we are and where we're going. I think a lot of the narratives are the updates rather, quite comprehensive, but this one is quite, I mean, it speaks about going live in October 2022, but I don't know if there's anything you can offer really to just expand on the narrative we have. It's on page 1 of the tracker. I can see you're scrolling for it.
If I might, while Mr. Crosby's just checking out the narrative, one of the things in relation to the first recommendation, the narrative talks about systems admin staff. The intention is that additional, or certainly one additional systems admin post is appointed to, and that job description, I understand, has been through the evaluation process in order to help move the implementation forward. There are a number of tasks which are sort of quasi-technical, let's say, that rest with the council but not with the IT team specifically, and the intent is that that post will address those, but at the moment that hasn't gone out to advert yet, but I am aware that it has been approved, so I can offer that.
Okay. Whether Mr. Crosby's found the bit, or is that where?
I have. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Emberson. Yeah, I don't think there's a great deal more to add on that, to be honest. In terms of the recommendation and what Jackie has outlined in terms of the mitigation, which is to bring in a systems admin to try and help deliver that. I can get an update on when that goes live in terms of the advert, and then provide an update on when they're in post. I'll pick that up with the Assistant Director and come back to you on that.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Crosby. Okay. I don't see anybody else indicating, so thanks very much for this report. And I think it is a lot clearer, and the overall trend, I think, is encouraging. So I say this sort of validates this whole approach through this committee. I think so. I think we were asked to note that, which I'm sure we're all happy to do, and then we can move on to the next item, which is agenda item 9, which is the SIPFA Financial Management Code. And is it, I think I've seen Darren's appearing. I think others, so you want to speak to this? It's a very important piece of work. Over to you.
Yes, this is an annual. Sorry, yes, this is the first of what will become an annual self-assessment of our compliance with the SIPFA Financial Management Code. That an initial assessment was carried out in March 2026 and reported to the committee in July of that year. The initial outcome at that point was 8 green ratings, 9 amber and no red. This assessment, however, was done before SIPFA had published their detailed guidance notes. In the latest rating, we've self-assessed as 6 green and 11 amber with no red. Now, in both cases where the rating has moved from green to amber, this has been as a result of a better understanding of the details required to deliver a green rating and does not in any way indicate a drop in performance. For example, Standard P makes reference to the CFO having personal and statutory responsibility for the statutory accounts. I am fully aware of my responsibilities in this area, as was Jackie when the previous self-assessment was done. However, the detailed guidance notes also refers to how successful we've been in complying with those responsibilities. Members of the committee will be aware of our ongoing issues with the statutory accounts, so we don't think that a green rating is appropriate at this point. However, with a positive direction of travel, which hopefully our EY colleagues will comment on later on the agenda, we feel that an amber rating is needed. So members of the committee are asked to note the contents of this self-assessment, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Carter. Any questions? So just from the chair, I mean, obviously this is a new thing, but so councils right across the country are now being asked to meet these standards, which I think is probably is a good thing. And I just wonder, you know, if it's difficult to know how we're doing set against other councils, the sort of progress we're making. Leave aside the issues of the accounts, which are obvious, which we're addressing. How are we doing? Do you think, sort of in the realm? I know it's probably a difficult question, but.
Well, there isn't a standard format for reporting on these, so we're using the red, amber, green format, but other councils can choose to use a different format. So that will make it difficult to compare performance between different authorities, as we're free to choose our own basis of assessment. However, I think it's fair to say that the Financial Management Code was introduced in response to some well-publicised financial failures in local councils.
Yes.
And the implementation of the code is designed to protect councils against those sort of financial difficulties. And the really key part of the assessment, I think, is about whether we have a robust level of financial reserves and our financial performance as council, and I think it's fair to say that in both of those areas we are performing well.
So these are effectively extra safeguards, because we have seen, unfortunately, councils suddenly discover they have a black hole in their finances and end up in obviously in serious positions. So these are safeguards, aren't they, that's put in place?
They are, yeah. So this was something that SIPFA developed in response to those previous failures, with the idea being that if councils fully comply with the code, then they will avoid getting into those sort of difficulties.
Okay. Councillor McElroy, you have to ask a question.
Oh, sorry, that was on the last item, and it was just a comment to say thank you to the officers in preparing the tracker and the extra effort that went into it, because it really did make my life a bit easier in reviewing that. But sorry, that's a throw back to a previous.
No, it's all right. No, sorry, it's looking at the screen, but no. I think the points were made, and I think that's obviously to be noted. Thanks so much, Councillor McElroy. And I say so with this report, actually, agenda item 9. I think we're asked to note. Oh, Jackie, sorry, Jackie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to build slightly on what Darren was saying in terms of the report and the purpose of the report. And as you rightly said, Chair, this is to provide safeguards for the council. I think from my perspective, as we move through the year, as we implement the new financial system and the training that Mr. Tidswell described is rolled out both for finance staff but for broader staff across the council in terms of budget holders and people who undertake financial transactions, I think you know, we should see the response to this assessment becoming stronger. It is very much a case of, you know, finance isn't just the job of and financial management isn't just the job of finance staff. It is a responsibility that is shared across the council. So I think phase 2 of the finance transformation plan plays it into this arena and will strengthen further where we are as we move forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's reassuring, and thanks for the work going on in this direction. I know there's an immense amount of work going on, so great. No, thanks for that. Okay, so I think we are asked to note it, which we can, and obviously we'll have progress reports on that going forward. So we are on to agenda item 10, which is the Q3 performance and monitoring report. And I'm looking to see, is it Mr. Donnelly?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Over to you.
So this report was presented to Policy Committee on the 7th of March 2022. The report sets out the projected revenue and capital outturn positions for both the General Fund and Housing Revenue Account as at the 31st of December 2021. The key headlines are that the General Fund revenue projection is an underspend of £274,000. That forecast assumes that there will be no requirement to draw down on any of the £2.776 million of earmarked reserves that was assumed when the 2021-22 budget was set. Also included within that forecast is delivery of £6.1 million of savings, with a further £5 million of savings on track to be delivered by the 31st of March. And the report also sets out performance against the measures of success published in the Council's corporate plan. Thank you, and Darren and I are happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you for that. I know this has gone through policy, those that sit on there, and I say overall, I think this is obviously a good position. There's no we're not having to rely on reserves or anything like that. Anybody got any questions, Donnelly? I think we've got to note this. It has been through policy already and does come here as well for obvious reasons. I'm looking round. No, well, I think we can note it. Thanks, Mr. Donnelly, for that. Let's get any questions. There's lots of certainly a lot of material here, and we shall move on to agenda item 11, which is the which we have referred to as the Information Governance Quarterly Update. It's Michael Graham. Oh, right, really. Hello, Ms. Rihanna, sorry, not Michael, which Rihanna? No problem. There's a whole host of people on the screen there to distinguish, but thanks very much for providing this update.
Good evening, I'm Nina George. I'm the Information Governance and Customer Relations Manager. I'm standing in for Michael. I'm going to go straight to the update part of the report around recruitment. So the Information Governance Officer post is still vacant. It's proved quite difficult to recruit into. So I've currently updated the job description and sent it up for re-evaluation with the hope of re-advertising the post. We did consider advertising with the market supplement, but we felt that we'd get a better calibre of candidate if we looked at career progression in the role. So that's how we want to progress it. Since the last update, the new team leader in the role and the apprentice are working together very well and undertaking some of the basic tasks. We've also recruited 2 agency staff members to help us clear some of the backlogs we've got with our subject access requests. In terms of FOI cases, in the last quarter we did see a drop. However, when I say last quarter, in Q2 we did see a drop in the number of requests into the organisation, and we felt that was as a result of the new system, which has a disclosure log that customers have to access before they actually submit the request, and the disclosure log already has quite a lot of information on there that people may need, like regular requests. But in Q3 we've seen a slight increase, and unfortunately our response times hasn't been as good as it was in Q2. We did attribute some of that to staff absences due to Christmas leave, and also sickness absences that we've seen across the board. But we are still monitoring closely, and we are still raising reports with CMT and encouraging assistant directors to get involved and encourage staff to respond on time. In terms of the data transparency audit that was carried out, the actual work to publish the data is complete and it's on the website. A process document has been written, and I've submitted all the information to Mr. Harrington's team to review. Should all be signed off imminently. The Information Governance Board has signed it off. Mr. Harrington's a member of the board. And talking about the board, we're continuing to meet monthly, and we monitor cybersecurity incidents and data breaches, and we look at what actions need to be taken forward with officers and services to try and mitigate some of them from happening again. We did talk about, I will come on to the training, I know that's a key area. So since the last report we had 24 incidents that were logged and reviewed by the board. One was reported to the ICO as a precaution, but they did come back to us with some recommendations, but they weren't taking any enforcement action. And those actions have been shared with the board and also the service involved. Some of our more common incidents are around misdirection of emails and on occasion actual physical post. And we have looked at systems possibly to put in place to try and mitigate that, but it is quite costly. But we've asked the board to explore it further. Well, the board has asked our IT providers to explore it further to see whether something can be brought in to mitigate that. But essentially, it is more around training and awareness across the organisation. But we are also planning a comms campaign to reinforce to staff the importance of the training and also the importance of being aware of potential cybersecurity attacks, etc. The information management strategy was presented and signed off at Policy Committee last month. So we have got, we are now in a position to move ahead with that. We want to look at the specific areas within the action plan, and what we're planning to do is to bring on board information champions or data stewards who are embedded within the services. We want to look at sort of, it's like an addition to their role with some incentives possibly to work with the information governance team to roll out some of those actions, because they know the service area. So we want to focus them on that. So that includes looking at what data they hold, cleaning that data, looking at retention schedules, and holding the data for the purpose that it's meant for rather than anything else. So there's some work to get underway. Other than that, just to focus on the training, the Information Governance Board is continuing to monitor the training every month, and the training figures we have seen an improvement since the last report. We'll continue to reinforce that. The board met yesterday, and we understand that there is a refresher package now available as well. We're going to encourage staff who've not completed the training to complete the proper training module, and those who have completed it to do the refresher training. We're going to bring in, we've discussed bringing in measures to encourage staff to take the training along with like our comms program. We want to tie it in with supervision and performance monitoring, and possibly even look at we discussed yesterday the possibility of actually turning off people's machines if they haven't completed the training. It seems quite extreme, but we are serious about it, and we're taking it very seriously with staff who have not completed the training. We've got a significant amount of staff who don't have access to our IT systems, and we've designed a paper-based training package for them. We've trialled it with the nursery staff and our community reablement team, and have received some feedback, so we've amended that. And what I want to do next is take it to DMTs and look at how we approach some of those other services, like our cleaning staff, the refuse management staff, street care, grounds people really, and our casual workers, how we can implement that. The next steps in our programme of work is very much around the strategy and the action plan, identifying who our data stewards will be so that they can work with us, and also the comms plan. And we are planning a whole year of comms around good practice, good governance, responding to FOIs on time. So all of that will link in. We've identified our information asset owners as our assistant directors. We've discussed the strategy at DMTs between myself, and we're going to look at training for the information asset owners and then for the champions. And also, just to go back to the team, myself and our team leader has completed a practitioner course in data protection, so that we are sort of more upskilled in that area ourselves as well. Okay. So that's it, you know.
Thanks very much.
If you've got any questions.
Very, very, very comprehensive. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see the piece around the training. You mentioned obviously e-learning via Learning Pool, and also that you were doing paper-based training for those without access to equipment. Do you also look at virtual classroom training as well as a means of actually reaching out to those that maybe won't, you know, sit in front of an e-learning course as such?
Yes, so we have done some face-to-face training with our colleagues in Brighter Futures. That's gone down really well. So when I go to DMTs, if they feel that their staff would prefer that, then I will take that approach. It may be that the paper-based training is shared with team managers, team leaders to discuss with their staff within their own team meetings. But I will look at that approach once I've gone to the DMTs to see what suits them better.
Thanks very much. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to follow on from that, it's really good to see that we're kind of adapting the possibilities of training for different staff that maybe don't have the access to IT. So that's really positive. And the data champions, very good idea as well. And really just to focus on the positives, that there's been such an increase in the training. And so obviously it's improved from January. So that's really positive, such as in light of what we were talking about earlier in terms of cybersecurity. So just to focus on that positive, that glad to see that's improving.
Thank you.
We seem to have gone up to 85%. Can I ask, is is that 85% of people who've got access to the actual IT, rather than obviously the list of people below, the refuse and the cleaners and?
Yes, that's just the IT users that we have, yes.
And are we really serious about switching their machines off if they don't comply? Which I think, well,
it was discussed yesterday. We didn't come to an agreement. Obviously, we would have to run it by CMT and
yes.
HR.
Yes. Well, no, I mean, obviously it's incredibly serious, as we've noted throughout this meeting, and it's the number one risk to the council. So I don't think it's completely unreasonable to have that. So I can see Ms Yates nodding. I just want to say anything, Jackie.
Yes, Chair. So absolutely, it has been discussed in the Digital Futures Board, which I chair, and I have also discussed it at CMT. It is good to see the numbers having gone up. Unfortunately, as members will know, it's been slightly slower than we would have wished, and we're still not at 100%. Now, it isn't beyond the realms that some of those individuals are off on long-term sick, or there may be other reasons for not having completed, but certainly the intention would be that we will in phases, so perhaps not everybody all at once, because it will start a clamour at the contact centre for IT, but yes, a phased turn off, because in light of the risk that cyber does pose to the authority, it's not acceptable that people are not undertaking the training that's been mandated.
And I wonder if other private sector organisations done this, sort of use these cyber tactics. Because obviously everybody's at risk from this private and public sector, isn't there?
Indeed. I mean, I can't answer for what other organisations are doing, but I do think in the context of the risk that is posed, and, you know, I was talking to Mr Harrington the other day about insurance for cyber attacks, and we have seen about a 25% increase in the cost of insurance against cyber. That doesn't cover the totality of the cost that the council might face if we were unfortunate, and there have been some authorities that have been hit very, very hard. So, you know, we do require staff to make sure that they're using data as appropriate as they can.
Almost going as fast as energy bills. Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, I think if we do go down that route, it should also apply to councillors, because I know there are some councillors that still haven't done their training. So we should switch off their devices should they not carry it out beyond the summer holidays.
I'm sure nobody in this room falls within that category, of course.
If I might, Chair, there is an intent as part of member induction following the elections to push the cyber training quite hard with members, as you know, particularly with new members, as well as kit is handed out to make sure we get that all picked up too.
Yeah, well, there will be a lot of new members, so it's actually an extremely good point, and a point well made by Councillor Emberson. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, are we looking at doing cyber training on a yearly basis in terms of, you know, actually it being a mandatory requirement for everybody that uses IT within the council to do that?
Yes, we are. Yes.
And and it's certainly something dear to my heart, because it's my day job is training and looking after compliance training. So I thoroughly endorse any actions that can be taken against those that don't do it because they don't want to do it, as opposed to those that don't do it because they can't do it. So as long as there is fairness in terms of finding out who, you know, falls into which category, then that's fine. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Okay. No, thanks. Excellent. I think we'll probably cover this. I don't seem to be any other indications. We've got to note this report. Obviously, we'll look forward to the next one at the next Audit and Governance meeting. Thanks very much, Rana, for your comprehensive report there. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is the closing financial accounts update. So I'm going to look to the screen to Mark.
I'm back again.
Yes, who's new with us, Mark? So thanks very much for coming to committee for the first time. So over to you, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very pleased to be here tonight. So my name's Mark Sanders. I'm Chief Accountant. I've been in post 3 weeks and very pleased to join the team here at Reading. A very short report for the council side of the final accounts process for tonight, which needs to be considered in alongside that of the next agenda item, item number 13 from external independent report from EY. So members will be aware that we've currently published our 1920 draft accounts, which is subject to current process of external audit scrutiny. And since last committee meeting, there's been a considerable amount of work, both on behalf of RBC staff and our external audit colleagues throughout that process. A large number of audit samples have been selected by our external auditors, some 465, of which to date there are only 38 remaining, which we're working through, providing explanations and detailed working papers thereon. In terms of the walkthrough controls processes that have been undertaken, they've all been undertaken by the external auditors, and around 90% of them have been completed and passed as we stand today. There are a number of very small adjusting items that we put through the accounts so far. Just to give you just to frame that in context, our materiality for our accounts for 1920 is some £4.8 million. We look at our fixed assets ledger. Our property, plant and equipment is valued at something like £1 billion. These are large public sector assets that we have in Reading. So the actual adjusting items that we have so far with the external audit processes are very small. We have around 3 as it's worked through for duplicate assets across our property, plant and equipment ledger, totaling around £300,000, which we've adjusted in our accounts for those. But at the same time, over that year 1920, we had some assets that need to be brought onto our balance sheet to compensate. So the net position is very little change on our fixed asset base. The 2021 accounts, which we are progressing at the same time, we are most of the way through the draft 2021 accounts, and we aim to publish those over the next forthcoming months. And what we're waiting for is the conclusion of the 1920 accounts, which is expected, hopefully, which we'll hear an update in a moment, but we're expecting that update around May, mid-late May. So our expectation is that we will publish the following year's accounts, taking account of any audit findings and adjustments that have been arising over the next few months, and with the external audit process beginning sometime around late summer, early autumn, when we hope to be looking at the 2021 accounts. In terms of the team in place, the council's put in place a very dedicated and focused team on the accounts process, and at the same time, as we stand here in beginning of April, we're starting to progress our 21-22 management accounts closure, and of course, in terms of the statutory accounts production, we currently will have 19-20, 20-21 and 21-22. We'll have 3 accounts worth processes which we'll be working through with a high degree of focus as we stand. I'm also working with the implementation of the new finance system, very heavily involved in the design of the general ledger structure for that, where I'm hoping to implement a simplified general ledger structure which will both support the management account structure for what RBC will use, but also will support my statutory final accounts process at the same time. So in all, I've found the team are very dedicated and working very considerably hard work with the external auditors over this process. I'm very pleased with the team that we've got in. There is a stable team looking forward, and we should be able to make significant inroads with shortening the external audit process over the forthcoming months. I'll pause at that point and take any questions, Chair.
Yeah, I'll say obviously some pretty rapid catch up here. So it looks like we're working effectively on three-year sets of accounts all at once, which I imagine is challenging. And if there aren't any questions, I think we could probably. Oh, Darren, yes, Warren, Mr. Carter, do you want to say something? Far away.
Yeah. So just to reinforce something that Mark just said, with Mark's arrival in Reading last month, the 5 most senior posts in the core finance team are now all filled by experienced permanent employees. And I think it's the first time Borough Council has been in that position for a number of years. So having a core of experienced staff who are all permanent is a really strong basis for us to move forward in the coming 12 months.
Great. No, thanks for that information. Councillor McElroy.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the work that's gone into getting this. It seems like no mean feat. I had a couple of specific questions which you might have yes/no answers for. But do you expect there to be any knock-on effects for the 21-22 accounts? Do you expect that we would meet that Part 5 of the accounts and audit regulations about allowing public to inspect the accounts within 30 working days, etc., etc.?
Okay. So who wants to take that? That's a good question.
I'm happy for Mark to, if he wants.
Thank you, Councillor. I think what we're looking at here is to open public inspection means the publication of draft accounts, and clearly there's a balance to be struck with making sure that when we publish draft accounts that they are materially correct as they can be, taking on all the information that we know through the external audit scrutiny. So I think to answer your question, I'd refer it really to our plan to publish in our 2021 and eventually 21-22 accounts as soon as we practically can, taking due regard to the appropriate materiality point to enable sufficient transparency in the public interest.
Yeah. Okay. You do have another question, Councillor McElroy?
Yeah. So I'll take that as a reasonable no to that previous answer, and I understand where that's at. Correct me if I'm wrong. At 9.1, you also say the audit fees for 2019-2020 will be reported in due course, and I guess I have 2 questions on that. What does due course mean in this context, and are we expecting the auditing fees to be higher than they would have been should this this situation have not arisen in the first place?
Okay. No, he's going to take that question really around cost, isn't it?
I think so.
Yes.
In terms of, are the fees higher than what they would otherwise have been? Yes, because we're in a position of recovery from the 1920 position. Are they likely to be less than prior years? Yes, because we've seen significant improvements coming through. What the fees will be, well, that's a question for the external auditor comment, probably either on the next item or at the next committee meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got the next item coming, so I think that could possibly be covered. Obviously, cost is an issue, and that's what makes the headlines in local newspapers. But it appears to me that we're obviously, by consolidating the lessons learned from previous years, the cost becomes less of a factor every year.
I think we're absolutely seeing that trend, and you'll see that through the detail of the draft audit findings report on the next item will be less than in prior years and less than in prior years again. So that will reflect.
Mr. Carter, I saw you indicate. So.
Yeah, so just to explain the process. So at the conclusion of the 2019-20 audit, our external auditors will be in contact with the PSAA, the national body who oversee the procurement of external auditors. And if there is a fee variation as a result of them having to do more work, they will put that request through the PSAA, and then the PSAA will then be in contact with me to get agreement to that fee variation. So at the moment, I can't tell you what, if any, fee variation there will be. I suspect there will be a variation, but as Mark said, I'm expecting the amount that we're paying in audit fees to reduce compared to previous years quite significantly.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is good. I don't think it's like a supermarket where you buy one get one free, is it really? So, there is, well, there's a cost to all. There's a cost to all councils with this, and I think that people has to be borne in mind with people that, you know, on this issue. It's important that we get it right.
Yeah, and just one other thing to mention on that. Nationally, the government have recognised that the level of audit fees across the country are higher than was anticipated when the current round of procurement was undertaken for external auditors. So we've recently received an allocation of additional funds from central government to cover an increase in anticipated audit fees.
So there's a cost of living crisis even in audit fees, it appears to me.
There is.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I think. Sorry. Do you want to say anything, Mr. Sellers? I think that's fine. Thanks for the questions, Councillor McElroy. Very pertinent questions. So I think at this point junction we can move obviously on to the external auditor update, because I mean these two items are linked. So I'll hand over to you. Who's doing this one? It's not Maria, is it?
Hi,
this is Louise Madoni. I reckon I was going to say I saw an L and an M. So thanks for.
Yeah, so it's me tonight. Unfortunately, Adrian, who's the senior manager for 1920 audit, unexpectedly went off sick, and Maria's on annual leave and she couldn't make the slot, unfortunately.
That's no problem.
So I wasn't actually involved in the 1920 audit. I was involved in the 1819 audit, which is why you probably recognize me, or some of you at least.
Yeah.
So I will walk you through the main agenda items we have for tonight. And I will take any questions. If I can't give you an answer, I will discuss with the audit team and they'll come back to you. So we have two papers today, the 1920 draft audit results report and the 1819 annual audit letter. I'll just give you an overview of the 1920 report, but with regards to the 1819 annual audit letter, I'll just note that this is a summary of all the results of our 1819 audit, which we're just required to produce. And I will not walk you through it because there is nothing in it that you wouldn't have seen before. So with regards to the status of our 1920 audit, as Mark already noted, we got through the majority of our testing. There are still some items we're working through, and the status is also summarized in the report included in the agenda papers. We have not noted any uncorrected misstatements at this point. There have been some corrected audit differences that Mark also mentioned. With regards to the VFM conclusion, although we recognize improvements in the arrangements, we do expect to have a qualification because we're reporting as at March 2020, and we have to look at everything that was in place as of that date. And the qualification concerns the Ofsted inspections, some issues with control account reconciliations, and the weakness around journal controls. This is just an expectation. Obviously, the final report and conclusion will have to go through our consultation processes before it's finalized. We also included a discussion of 12 internal control recommendations, and management responded to all of them. You can see them in more detail in the report. And just a point to note that we are not expected to do any work on the whole of government accounts due to the delay of the audit. So that having said that, we're aiming to finalize all the procedures for the 1920 audit within the coming weeks, with one caveat, unfortunately. Some of you, or you might be aware of a national issue that came up in the last couple of months around accounting treatment of infrastructure assets by local authorities.
Yeah.
The issue was raised by another audit firm. And for those that might not be familiar with this issue, I can give a brief overview. It was noted that a large number of local authorities do not recognize the carrying amount, the gross carrying amount of infrastructure assets when these are replaced or rebuilt. So, for example, when a road is resurfaced, the SIPFA code requires to recognize the gross carrying amount and the accumulated depreciation of the asset component that was replaced instead of just building up capitalized expenditure over time. We are aware that SIPFA formed an urgent task and finish group looking at this issue. And as I said, it's a national issue. And in the meantime, audit firms have paused completion of audits. Nevertheless, aside from the infrastructure asset issue, Maria is determined to finalize all the audit procedures on 1920 in the coming weeks. We also wanted to note that the issue with infrastructure assets and thus incompletion of the 1920 audit will not prevent us from starting the following year's audit.
That's good.
And I will comment just briefly on the question around the audit fees. I concur with what Darren has said, and we haven't determined the fees at this stage of the audit. They are determined once the audit is completed, discussed with management, and then submitted to PSA for review and approval. And at this stage, I can take any questions.
Have we got any questions? Councillor Emberson.
So I think I might be moving forward, but I didn't know if you're going to come on to pension discussion, because it's referred to on page 367 that there might be an update on that. So I just wondered if we were going to go through that as well.
That was the issue of Royal Windsor and the poor government.
I wasn't going to go into detail, and as I mentioned, I wasn't involved in the 1920 audit, so I will take your question. I will communicate it with the audit team, and they'll come back to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does say in the report that just around the Berkshire pension scheme that there was a significant problem, but I think it does say in the report apparently that's not going to hold up the accounts, which hopefully is reassuring, but it's quite a serious breach. 1.2 million was involved looking at this report. So
I noted the question and we will get back to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So as far as you're aware, then, even for these riders, everything is on track, despite some of these national situations that have arisen that SIPFA are looking at. I was wondering, because when you said about the road resurface, I suddenly thought we're resurfacing 9 million of roads and capitalisation. I suddenly had this awful fear that that would be a hold up because of doing that, but it obviously appears not. This is just an accounting situation.
Yes, it will hold up the signing off of the audit for 1920 until the issue is resolved, and we're waiting to see the outcome of the SIPFA focus group, but it will not hold up the start of the following year's audit.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, thanks. I mean, it's a very, very comprehensive report the members have got in front of them. I'm looking around, there's nobody else is indicating, so I think, Louise, I think we can just note your report and with thanks, and always conclude the meeting at this point. I'm looking around. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, everybody. Obviously, people attending online and obviously in person here tonight, and thanks so much for bearing with me as the temporary chair. I'm hoping that the permanent chair is in position to resume his role as permanent chair after the May elections. Okay, so with that, I think I can conclude the meeting with thanks to everybody at just before 7:55. Thanks everybody. Good night.
Yeah. Night.